All right, hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study. I'm playing this simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study. Excuse me, through the entire Bible. We are in Luke's Gospel, chapter 9. Now, in our last study, I had to we changed the title because I said that time when Moses stopped by and um, I didn't get to it, so I'm going to get to it today. It's a fascinating story that the more I studied it there's some truth here that I'm going to get to today. Um, you could pretty much say between life and death, like what happens when we die. And I'm going to say not that the story itself, that was the aim of the story, um, but it does it does give us some revelation. It gives us a glimpse. Um, it gives us a glimpse in terms of life and death. There are people, there's a range of beliefs in terms of death. You could say life after death, the wide range, okay? There are some people that believe that when you die, then that's it. That is the end. Lights out, annihilation, no more. Jehovah Witnesses believe that. And if the Jehovah Witness is true, then there's no eternal wrath that you have to worry about. That's fine. But then there's just a range of, for example, Catholics in their purgatory. But of course, there's absolutely not one shred of scripture evidence to support that. Just the figment of the imaginations of somebody back then, purgatory. But the biblical, and then, by the way, there are those Christians that believe in what's called soul sleep, which means that when you die, you sort of sleep, and they take from some of the scriptures where Jesus talking about those that are asleep. Right? He talked about Lazarus sleeping, but there are people that take it in the sense of the to the most ultimate, say, literal sense that when you die, you go into this sleep stage, okay, which again, in and of itself is, from a Christian perspective, is silly. So this passage is going to kind of like really gives us an insight. There's no soul sleep. There's no such thing as soul sleep, that you sleep in the grave. For that matter, what happens to people that are burned alive or an explosion or something like that? But let's get to it. Luke chapter 9, and let's pick it up. Now, at verse number 28. He says, about 8 days after these words, he took along Peter, John, and James, and went up on a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly, two men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah. And they appeared in glory and were speaking of his death, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. And then Peter and those with him, meaning James and John, were in a deep sleep. And when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men who were standing with him. And as the two men were departing from him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah, not knowing what he said. And while he was saying this, a cloud appeared and overshadowed them, and they became afraid as they entered the cloud. Then a voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son, the chosen one. Listen to him." After the voice had spoken, only Jesus was found, and then they kept silent, and in those days told no one what they had seen. Now, Jesus actually had told them not to speak of this. Um, so now let's look at this for a moment. That to me, this is so fascinating because, as I said, it gives some insight to me to life and death. What really is reality about? You have a spiritual realm, and then you have a physical realm. The reality is that the physical realm would be more of the counterfeit. That the real reality is the spiritual realm. In other words, all around us, right, which we cannot see, that's the reality. That the physical, you're only here for a moment, and that in the spiritual realm, that is the eternal. You can say the never-ending realm, and thus remember, as humans, we are spirit, soul, and body. Spirit, soul, and body. So your spirit is the real you. In other words, when I say you, think about this here. Here you see Moses and Elijah. Now, the whole, what, of course, the story itself is given by revelation from God, okay, that we're able to even put together what is going on. Or actually, I should say, we're not putting it together. God is the one who's given us a revelation explaining what is going on. So now you see these two men, Moses and Elijah. So the question is, how do you know that it is Moses and Elijah? Well, okay, of course, by revelation, okay, by revelation. And then, but just think about this now. Elijah had been dead for some 800, maybe 850 years. And Moses had been dead for some 1400 to 1500 years. Now let that sink in. Moses' body was buried up, I forgot the mountain's name, that, if you read like the very last chapter of Deuteronomy, you see Moses conclude his final words, and then he goes up into the mountains, and Israel never sees him again. And then the postscript is God buried Moses' body. Now, Elijah was taken up in a whirlwind. Now, there are a lot of people, and I don't think it's worth getting into a big debate over, but the idea is that Elijah did not, Elijah did not, um, 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 he wasn't resurrected. So what happened at some point, as was taken up from the people, that his body actually died. It deceased. In other words, basically the vision, the sight that you saw when Elijah was swept up, and then he was taken, okay, and then it disappeared, okay. He did not go to heaven, because Old Testament people, and as even the Bible says, flesh and blood cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, as I said, not really worth to get into a debate over that. If you don't agree with that, perfectly fine. It's just, right now, it's really just conjecture. All right, so, but here's my point. So you have Moses and Elijah, who had been, again, dead some 1,500 years. And now here they are talking with Jesus. See, their bodies. See, but what we see is their spirit. So then, again, man is a spirit, he has a soul, and he lives in a body. Your spirit and your soul is the immaterial part. The immaterial part. And but your body, your physical body, okay? So it is mortal, corrupt. It is mortal. So your body, your body is let's see here. Your body is okay. I think I got it. All right. Anyway, your body is well, because of Adam, it dies. So that's why I said when you look at Peter, when you look at Elijah and Moses, both men, they've been dead for centuries at this point that they're talking with Jesus. Now, so when you die, you do not cease to exist. You don't you don't cease to exist. You um you continue on. Now, let's see, since I'm here, let's look at a couple of verses. Let me show you a couple of verses where the Bible gives us like life goes on. Life. Now we know that in the spiritual realm, we know that existence, God, first and foremost, God existence. His existence is there. He lives. He exists. I shouldn't say live because God is life. He exists in the spiritual realm. Okay, and let's see here. So God exists in the spiritual realm. Now there are angels, creatures. Actually, for lack of a better term, there is an entire spiritual realm around where God exists. So in it, his throne, heaven, and then let's say whatever else is around the vastness of that. Now, the universe is physical. So when you look at the universe, and that this becomes again amazing in itself. So the universe is within the space-time continuum, the physical realm. That's why we could, we can't build a ship and then go to heaven. Okay? We can't build a ship and go to heaven. Think about this. We can't. We can't build a ship and go to heaven because we don't have the capability of going from the physical realm to the spiritual realm. So, for example, when everybody in Scripture, let's look at the Mary, for example, and Joseph, when the angel Gabriel who appeared to Daniel. So you could not, they could not physically follow Gabriel, right? Gabriel appears in the physical realm, and then he goes back to the spiritual realm. So only within the realm of God's sovereignty can that happen. You can't follow him. You can't say, okay, I'm going to go back to heaven with you. No, you can't do that. We do not have the capability of doing that. Okay. All right. So I'm trying to think. I'm trying to find this one scripture here. Let's see. But anyway, so and it's something I can say we just get a glimpse of. So I'm not going to try to go too deep in this because we don't have enough information for us to go deep. And then, but so watch this. So where Moses and Elijah were at the time, let me show you this. And again, these are just glimpses. Actually, we're right here in Luke, and let's go to, I believe I want 16. Okay, let's do that. So let's do 2. And I might just stick with this because I'm trying to find something and I don't want to take up the time to, but this will give us, again, a perfect example. So watch this, it's verse 19. And we're going to come back to this story, obviously, because this is in Luke chapter 16. Here's the story Jesus is telling. He says, there was a rich man who would dress in purple and fine linen, feast lavishly every day. But a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, was left at his gate. He longed to be filled with what fell from the rich man's table, but instead the dogs would come and lick his sores. One day the poor man died and was carried away by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried, and being in torment in Hades. So right here, let's stop for a moment. We get a location of something. Okay? So watch this. So both men were in the physical. Their life in the physical. Okay, one was poor, one was poor, one was rich. Then both died, and notice the poor man was carried. Well, stop. If he died, what was carried? Not pallbearers, but what was carried. Then you see the rich man also died, watch this, and was buried. Body dead, right? Body dead. Now, as the story progresses, his body is now decomposing, decaying. So then he says the rich man also died and was buried, and continuation. So no soul sleep, no annihilation. He continues. And being in torment, and being in torment in Hades. And Hades is you could say, well, the difference in our English words when Jesus would say hell, right? That was it was a garbage dump, and it was a figurative language. It was a illustration, right? He would point to the garbage dump, hell, okay, Gehenna, and then it was an illustration of Hades. So Hades is when we say hell, we really mean Hades. Like when people say go to hell, they're talking from a biblical standpoint. They're really talking about a garbage dump that was outside of Jerusalem. That it was in the valley of Gehenna. Okay, that later became again a ruin. Then later became a garbage dump. And so it was a continual garbage dump, and it was continual fire. You could go by there, you would see worms and maggots. They would dump bodies there. And that was the image that Jesus gave of Hades, which is the eternal, it's not so much as eternal, but it is um, um, the place where the departed spirits, that's a key, departed spirits go. So he says, and being in torments in Hades, he looked up and saw Abraham a long way off with Lazarus at his side. Father Abraham. So here's a couple of things we see. We see sight, we see consciousness, we see memory. Then he says, now we see speech. Father Abraham, he called out, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water to cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this flame. Son, Abraham said, remember that during your lifetime you received good things, and just as Lazarus received bad things, but now he is comforted while you are in agony. Besides, now I'm going to stop here because he goes on, and we're we're going to eventually come to this story in just a few studies from now. But what I want you to see is, notice that the physical, see physical. And this story illustrates that. You go from the physical to the spiritual. And then the spiritual is what you see. So that the same thing what Peter and Mark, they saw Elijah, who had been dead for 800 years, right? And then they saw Moses, who had been dead for like 1500 years. But what were they looking at? They were looking at his spirit, the spirit. So your spirit is never ending. Okay, your spirit, it goes on. So, um, um, I can't find it. I have to probably look for it again. I wanted to show you another verse where it was in the Old Testament. I'll tell you the story. In the Old Testament, King Saul, whom God had rejected, wasn't speaking with them, and he was in such anguish that he even violated one of his edicts. He driven out all of the spiritualists. But he goes to this witch of Endor because he wanted to get a word from the Lord, but the Lord wasn't talking to him. So he figured, well, let me go to Samuel, the prophet who had died. And so the witch, said, who do you want me to call up? And he said, Samuel. And she was shocked. And all of a sudden, here comes Samuel. And he makes this statement, go, why have you disquieted me? Why you disturb me? And he says, well, God's not talking to me. The prophet's not talking to me. I just need a word. And God said, well, if they're not talking to you, what do you think I'm going to tell you? And then he basically pronounces the same condemnation that one Samuel had given him and that everyone had given him. He basically pronounced that, hey, it's not good for you. Tomorrow you're going to be dead. My point is, here was Samuel, that it came up, and then notice, from the earth. So what you have is that before Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, the departed saints, those that died in righteousness, went to a certain part of Hades, while on the other side of Hades, those are the wicked that died. And as you can see here, they were in torment. But those the picture is Abraham's bosom, Abraham's righteousness, you can say that, did not experience the torment that, for example, the rich man you can see here experienced. So what is kind of a great revelation here, and we'll come back to this in the next study, is what is comforting to know, especially for those, your loved ones that have passed away, they've gone on to heaven. Think about this. There's no suffering. Obviously, there's no torment. But notice this. Think about the existence they are enjoying. And I'll come back to that in the next study. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP The Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. And I'll see you in the next study.